It's time for Dr. Rademaker's Prescription for Transformation. Let's tap into your own authentic genius and live the life you desire.
You are now listening to
Join Dr. Rademaker for an enlightened conversation about our brain intelligence, our body intelligence, and our energy intelligence. And now, here's your host, Dr. Bart Rademaker.
I'm Dr. Bart Rademaker, and this is Prescription for Your Transformation. Real people, real conversations, and real success. And what's delightful about what I get to do on this program is really get an insight of some of the geniuses of people that I know. And one of the cool things that, some of us might want to know is have a glimpse to our future. And I can't think of anybody better than Larry Martin. He's an astrocartographer who has a sixth sense as to what's going to happen next. And so for today's show, very excited to be talking about the future, our future of all of us in 2021. So listen carefully to what Larry has to share with you so that you can plan accordingly.
When I look back at my economic forecast from a year ago, it's right on the money. I just didn't have the exact same reasoning. For example, here in the United States, we have an unbelievable amount of debt. And the more money they keep printing with nothing to back it up makes that debt even worse. And ultimately, and I still think it's going to be right about the first half of 2022, we're going to see an end to that debt, either by default or by switching over to the gold standard. So there's a lot of economic people that consult with me on a near daily basis, wondering about gold and silver prices and all kinds of other things. But as far as the reasoning, I was simply going on astronomical cycles and forecasts. I wasn't actually looking and seeing, we're going to have this massive pandemic, the entire world's going to shut down, and that's the reason for the correction in the springtime of 2020.
Right.
Unless you're really into doom and gloom and the end of mankind, you're not looking for aspects to be quite as harsh as they ended up being. The good news is that we're way through the far worst of it. The worst was absolutely between April and June. And I had so many phone calls in June asking me, is the year over yet? Is the year over yet?
Right.
But now that we are into the last, beginning the fourth quarter of 2020, I can safely tell you we just have one more hurdle to get over, and that's election day. And I was looking at this a year ago, almost 2 years ago, thinking, election day in the United States is going to be on November 3rd. And perhaps not the worst planetary alignment, because that was back in April, but the second worst planetary alignment is literally on November 3rd. So I'm gonna see if I can't grab like a valid early ballot, vote sometime in October, and then I don't know, hide in the basement, find a bunker somewhere, because we're so addicted now to our technology, whether it's your smartphone or your calendar or your website or your contact list. I mean, I talk to my kids all the time and best friends all the time. I don't think I could tell you any one of their phone numbers. I just know to, BART, and that's your phone number, and to lose that data or to think that I don't have that backed up is a frightening thought. Even just the idea of getting a new phone or a new tablet is anxiety producing, because you have to transfer your data somewhere. And if that doesn't go well, if you've ever been in that boat, it can be a frightening experience. And so what happens is when the planets are in a stressful aspect, and let's say 50 years ago, we would have said, just don't mail any letters that day, and don't plan on making any phone calls, and maybe just grab a beer, sit out in the backyard, have a barbecue. That sounds like great advice. We don't understand how many different ways we're connected, like to our cable television or the internet or our devices. to where if somebody says there's going to be a communication snafu, you don't really comprehend how frustrating or difficult those days are going to be until they happen.
Right.
Because we're just no longer in an era where, we're upset because the mail's late from the post office. That's not even an issue anymore for most people. But if you can think about your phone not working for a day, that's just a nightmare waiting to happen. And so a lot of the things we're more vulnerable to are much more prevalent today than they've ever been before. Even simple things that you would have had your computer geek do for you years ago, now you've got to do it on your own, because if you were to call somebody up and say, hey, I need somebody to help me back up my computer, like Dr. Phil would say, well, good luck with that. There's so many things now you've got to fix on your own, or you've got to be somewhat tech savvy, or you're going to do without that connection. I don't even know if I'd call that a privilege anymore. It's just a way of life now. So when we got to 21 is associated with business, government, groundedness, reality, work hard, get good rewards. I mean, it's all the things your parents wished you would be when you were growing up. In other words, they wanted you to be mature and responsible and be a good person and get good grades and all the things you always knew that you were supposed to do, but you either failed a little bit or you tried and did really well and then wondered where, the
Right.
free porta was, In other words, why am I not a millionaire by age 20 if I did everything right? So when these three outer planets moved into Capricorn, and they started about 2016, but all of them didn't gather together until very late in 2019 and the first quarter of this year, 2020. And it really rocked our world. It really was to the point of questioning government, questioning reality, questioning authority figures, wondering, does anybody have a plan? Does anybody know what they're doing? And the correct answer is no. Nobody knows what they're doing. Our entire way of defining reality was being turned upside down. And you probably could list several examples yourself of some people handled it as well as you could imagine. Other people coped. They adjusted. They went through maybe a really tough month or three and came out fairly okay. And then we've got a handful of people that have not done so well,
Right.
or even people that might have even passed away. So to say it was difficult is just a gross understatement. To say that we're through it all is to say, well, we're mostly through it all. And if people are expecting election day to be the solution of their problems, they're going to have a very tough time getting through the end of the year. But if you're like me and we've seen the worst of this already, and now we're kind of looking at maybe, like a final pop quiz of, okay, how do you define reality? What do you invest your time, effort, and energy in? And what advice would you give yourself if you were starting this year all over? And I think if you can answer any of those questions, you're going to have a good end of the year and even a more fabulous 2021. And that's what I've been telling a lot of my clients. Just please do what you can to get through the holidays. Every country is different. I see people in Australia getting arrested for walking outside without a mask. I see other countries like Sweden being wide open as if nothing's ever gone wrong. So it's very difficult to give one blanket statement to everybody because they live in different cultures, different societies, different rules. Heck, even in the United States, some of the 50 states are like Sweden. Indiana's wide open. All businesses are open. No masks required anywhere. Florida is trying to get to that point. All the other states are somewhere in between. And of course, if you're in California, you're still in complete lockdown, where not even schools are open. And like I said, most of the states in the United States are somewhere in between there. So I think we've all had to do a lot of introspection. Everyone's gone through a certain degree of isolation. Even if you're
Right.
married with kids, you've
Right.
been isolated in some way, shape, or form. And I still want to believe, and we won't be able to prove this for another year or two, I still want to believe that we've entered what I call a great awakening. We might have talked about this last time, where in my optimism, or some people call it fantasy, we've learned that what's on the inside of us is what's important. Our health, our mental constructs, our mental strength, as opposed to being physically strong. That it really didn't matter what industry you were in this year. It didn't matter how old you were. It really didn't. It didn't matter how much money you made. Obviously, ridiculously wealthy people might have had it a little easier than some, but they were worried about their investments. They watched the stock market nearly crash. So I don't think there was anybody unaffected. All of us were affected to some degree. And I think it caused a lot of people to really review their life or take another look at their life direction, if that makes any sense. And I don't think I'm being overly dramatic. I think to some, they went through absolute hell. And to others, they went through a lot of insight. Hopefully, we all gained a little bit of both. Because going through hell, I think, lets us understand how strong we really are. And I think anytime we go through tough times, it's a confidence builder, and also gives you firsthand experience when you give advice to other people. No one likes a hypocrite, and no one likes somebody, giving advice on something they haven't really participated in. But to someone like yourself, Bart, or what I do for a living, and I can say, hey, I've got firsthand examples of this is what happened, or that's how it went down, or this is what they did to solve the problem. And I can't even express in words how valuable that has been. You can't go find a college course on 2020, and so I look at that as being just an infinitely valuable lesson. And it's going to make the next 3 years just look like a walk in the park. Even when we hit the economic skids, which are coming like a freight train, and you can see all the gates are down, the red lights are flashing, and we're just standing around wondering, well, let's print another $1 trillion. And everyone's like, yay, all right, yay. Hey, write me a check for $1,200. Just go ahead. In fact, I just paid my German Shepherd. People over the age, only people over the age of 50 know that there's a day of reckoning coming for all that.
Right.
Younger people are just wondering, if somebody can just give them a new credit card. So when we hit that day of reckoning, we're going to look back on 2020 and go, well, the whole world's broke, but at least I don't have to wear a mask. In other words, I think we'll keep it in perspective, and I think we'll do just fine. The key is not just handling it astrologically, but to handle it in a more sane position. If we can switch over to the gold standard, which my friends who are experts all say, that's our only choice. In other words, we don't have 5 or 6 different choices. We can't keep kicking the can down the street like we said back in 2010, which is exactly what we did. We kicked the can down the street and kept printing more money. We don't have that option. We really don't. Countries across the world will no longer accept the dollar. Oil is not the commodity it used to be. In other words, our own oil production has flooded the market. So instead of $120 a barrel for oil, it's what I think, maybe 40, maybe.
Oh, is it that low? So, I didn't know that.
It's low. It got down to about $34 just a week ago. So, thinking that that's going to pay for your kids' college, not going to happen. And gold and silver have not reached the heights that we all predicted. So, and that's due to a lot of short selling by JP Morgan and a lot of the banks that are right on the edge of complete meltdown and bankruptcy. And the printing of trillions of dollars is the only thing keeping our banks afloat right now. So I give it a good another year. But I think, where we're all going is that looking at it astrologically gives me a sense of peace and calm. In other words, I tell everybody all the time, I can't move a planet. I can't make your chart look better than it does. And the good news is it probably won't be any worse than what I'm looking at. But instead, I'm looking at it as a series of potentials to be able to say, okay, well, if you're an Aquarius, you're going to have the best year out of the last 21. That doesn't mean you're winning the lottery. It just says you're having the best year of the last 21. And what you do with that is entirely up to you.
Right.
We'll talk about your chart in a few minutes here. But if we were talking about highlights or lowlights of 2020, we'd be here for another hour entirely. The the last presentation I did lasted about 3 hours. But 2021 has actually very few major points. The difference is, instead of those aspects lasting about a month and impacting us for several, we're only going to have about 2 phenomena, but they're going to last all year. So whatever happens in your birth chart for January, February, March will pretty much dominate the entire year. So the bad news is, if it's something really tough and you're
It's time for Dr. Rademaker's prescription for transformation. Let's tap into your own authentic genius and live the life you desire.
You are now